Hey, good morning. Pete here, Rancho Coyote. Got the 68 FJ40 here. This is the next video in the series of getting it running. So you see we've been doing some work here. Got her up on jacks, got all the wheels off. I'm working on the brakes. Clutch master cylinder, clutch slave cylinder, and brake master cylinder all need some work, so we're working on those. And also got the fuel tank out, and found out that it had rusted through on the bottom. So even though the inside of the tank looked really great, the bottom was all rusted out. So we got a new tank from Toyota dealer, OEM tank, and that's sitting in place right now, ready to be plumbed in. But this video is about the carburetor. I told you in the last video that the accelerator pump plunger was stuck on this, and just decided to do a whole tear down and overhaul. So here it is, spoiler alert, all back together, ready to go back in. This video is about the disassembly. I got kind of long, so I just want to break it up. I'll have the assembly video coming up soon. This is all about disassembly and identifying the individual parts inside here. So I hope you enjoy that and find some use out of it. And here we go. All right, thanks. I'll be using this exploded view during the video, and you'll notice that number 26 and 48 are not included on my model, and there was a jet in the kit that my carburetor didn't have. Here, the first thing I do is just kind of look over the whole carburetor, especially if I've never done one like this before, which I haven't done one of these. I just film everything, all the angles and the different views to get a good idea where all the levers and the hoses and the screws are and the springs and things like that, so that later on when I go to reassemble it, I got something to look back on. All right, so let's take this thing apart and see what we got. So I pulled each screw out one at a time and checked the length for the that holds the top of the carburetor on, and I did find that one screw was a little bit shorter than, about half as long actually as all the rest. So I made a note of where that screw came from. So if the top of the carb's a little snug, you can just either give it a light tap or find a safe place to just give it a tiny little pry, see if it comes loose, and this one popped right off, so didn't have to go any further than that. First thing I noticed here was the needle was stuck, so it was not coming down with the float. It was staying stuck in there. I just kind of popped it loose with my little dental pick. So this is the power piston, and it's spring loaded. It should be able to push it in with your finger and spring it in and out, but it's not moving. So here I'm trying to get the accelerator pump plunger lifter rod to move, and it's frozen, so give it a little shot of that PB Blaster penetrating oil right there. Let that soak in for a second. And here I'm just checking the fit of the new gasket, make sure it's the right one before I take the old one off, because the old one looked pretty good and I'm going to try to save it, but it's just in case I wanted to make sure that the new gasket was the right one. Here I'm taking a little circlip off the top of the accelerator pump plunger shaft. Here I'm taking a little screw out that holds the accelerator pump linkage guide in place. There was also a little lock washer under that screw that fell off into the float bowl down there. And that bowl is still full of old fuel that's turned to goo, so I'm trying to fish that washer out. Now that guide that screw is holding on, I'm trying to see if it'll come off, but it's kind of trapped in there because the pump plunger is frozen in place so that linkage doesn't move, and it needs to come up a little bit to get that guide out of there, but it's not budging. So there's a little bit of rust and grime and dirt and dust on that exposed part of the pump plunger lifter rod. So I got a little tiny piece of Scotch-Brite in a clamping tweezers, kind of like a forceps, and I'm just kind of cleaning off the exposed part of that shaft so it'll slide up through the hole. I tried gently pushing and prying and prodding on that plunger and it wouldn't move, so I decided to try these external snap ring pliers. Give me a little leverage underneath the linkage there and pop right out. So you never know what tool in your toolbox is going to work when you need it, but that worked perfect for this situation. Of course, as soon as that linkage came loose, the little guide fell off, just like it's supposed to. Fish that out of there. So this is that pump plunger lifter rod that was protruding out through the bottom of the carburetor that I used the Scotch-Brite pad on. And you can see it just came out nicely. Cleaning it up a little bit more here to get any remaining rust off of there and dirt. Get it all cleaned up. This is the upper accelerator pump plunger spring. It sits on top of on the shaft. There's the plunger itself. Put that spring back on there so I know where it goes. And then down underneath the plunger is another spring. Just pop that out. And that goes on the bottom of the plunger. Now here I'm taking a little piece of rolled up Scotch-Brite and gonna slide it down through that bore where that pump plunger rod goes. Clean the bore out, get it any rust or grime that's down in there cleaned out. Another thing that works really well in these bores like this is a brass bore brush that you use on cleaning a gun barrel. They just put them in there and you put them on your drill and clean it all out really nice. So here I'm going after the power valve down there in the bottom of the bowl, and it's a slotted brass screw slot down in there, so you want to make sure you use a good screwdriver that fits all the way across. You'll see here in a second. You don't want to slip and damage these brass jets. And that little plunger there should spring, but it's frozen just like everything else. So much varnish in this carburetor, it's just everything's just gummed up and stuck. So here I'm getting the new one that came with the kit, and you'll see here that that little guy just springs down nice and smooth, but the other one's stuck. I was able to play around with it a little bit and lube it up and clean it with some carb cleaner, and I got it to move, but didn't really matter because I'm going to replace it with the new one that came with the kit. You can also take this apart. There's a little clip that comes off and the whole thing comes apart. You can clean it. Well, I probably spent more time than I needed to on this little thing, but I wanted to get it freed up just in case the one in the kit wasn't the right one and I had to reuse it. Just wanted to know what I had here, if it was salvageable or not. So after working that oil in there and back and forth, I finally got it to move pretty freely. Working the oil down inside. Comparing it to the new one, the little plunger at the top sticks out a little bit higher on the new one. And the overall length of the new one has a couple more threads to it. But the main body part looks about the same exact length. And the threads the hole where it screws in is deep enough to accept those couple extra threads. So I think it's going to sit in the right place when it all goes back together. Alright, so here we're going after the main jet. It's a 150. Can't read it, but it's a 150.
Goes in that hole. The one closest to the float hole. This one goes in the inner hole. In there.
So here I'm just reminding myself where that power valve goes down in there. And here I'm going after the main air bleeder, which the kit did not come with these, so you got to be careful with this one. Another brass piece in there that you got to be careful with. And it's a number 60.
This goes right there.
Alright, now we're going after the slow jet. It's a pretty small diameter hole down there and a pretty small brass screw head. So I've got this nice long narrow screwdriver, fits perfect in there. That did come with the kit.
This one definitely says 60. It recessed in this hole.
So this is where the accelerator pump plunger goes. And way down in there is a little check ball that pops up and down to let fuel in and out. And there's a tiny little spring retainer that holds it in. So getting that retainer out right now. Once that retainer's out of the way, if there's not a bunch of goo and gum and varnish down in there, that ball would normally just fall right out, but it stuck like everything. So I tried a magnet, tried my dental pick just to see if I could wiggle it around and free it up. And I went back to the magnet, and nothing was working. So here I'm resorting to a little blast of carburetor cleaner to free it up from the goo. And see if I can jiggle it around, free it up. Well, I tried a little bit of everything. A stronger magnet, more dental pick, more spray, more everything, and back and forth. And eventually I thought, well, maybe it's a stainless steel ball and the magnet's not going to pull it out of there. So I tried soaking it and dumping it out and nothing. And then we got lucky with a little can of air blaster. Just one little squirt of air in the hole in the bottom of the bowl that goes behind that ball bearing, and it popped it right out.
Yeah, it did it. Little air can here. There we go. Everything's pretty darn gummy in there.
So here we're going after the pump discharge weight and the steel ball that's under it. Two little tiny parts, so you want to really keep track of those two things once you get to them. This is the pump jet plug. So down inside here is a pump discharge weight and steel ball, and they're kind of stuck, so I'm trying to figure out how to get them out. It's supposed to just fall out, but it's not coming. So I tapped the body of the carb on the table, and I got this is the weight. And this is the steel ball. They popped out. I'm not sure what the community consensus is on these sight glasses, but on my last FJ40 carb I overhauled, I could not get the glass out by just gentle pressure. I gave it any more pressure, I was afraid it was going to break, so I just left it in. And I went through the carb dip and everything and came out, and the gasket rubber didn't melt, and there were no leaks. So decided to do the same thing here. It doesn't want to come out. And I'm really not sure how available those sight glasses and the rubber gasket is. So I was just going to leave it in there unless it leaked. And the first one didn't leak, so I'm leaving this one too. Even the float pivot pin was stuck in there with varnish. Wouldn't come out. That should be just a nice light slip fit. Now I'm pulling out the needle valve. Remember it was stuck in there when we first pulled the top off the carb. Now this is the needle seat. It's pretty wide, and the screwdriver is not wide enough to grab both sides of the tangs in there. So I had to dig in my toolbox and find a piece of strap metal that I had made of my own tool for airplane carburetor seats that are really wide, like almost a 1/2 inch wide. So I had ground down a nice flat edge on a piece of steel there, and it worked great on this one. And now we're going after the power piston. It's held in with a little clip. It's a special shaped little washer and a lock washer and a screw.
And these things have a habit of getting really stuck. They're a pretty snug fit. And the last carburetor I did had the same thing. I had to use a little heat on my last carburetor. See if this one might free up. This is a real no-no using pliers on a brass piece, but if you're careful and don't let it slip, just to see if it'll come loose. Just like that. Nothing's tight at all on this carburetor. Almost no torque on anything.
Well, we got it all disassembled down to the bare bones, and now we got to cycle it through that carburetor dip, which takes a couple days to do its job. So I think it took 3 days to cycle all the parts through the dip, and then clean them up, anything that was left on them, and then blow them dry and get everything ready for assembly. So that's the end of the disassemble part. Really hope it was helpful and you enjoyed watching. Reassembly is coming up in a video shortly, so I hope you join us for that. You can subscribe and hit the bell button if you want to be reminded. So otherwise, really appreciate you coming along. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.